Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Insomnia Podcast. I am your host, Javier Novoa, the real Javier Novoa from The Libertarian Investor, and we have a huge show for you tonight. Breaking news as we are starting this podcast. It would seem as if this horrific conflict is entering into another stage as missile fragments hit the Temple Mount. Of course, unfortunately, some of the apocalyptic beliefs of the major religions are uniting, and we know what certain individuals would like to see happen with Masjid al-Aqsa, with the Temple Mount, and so on. We pray that it doesn't escalate much further. But apart from this, I have a lot of investment and economic news for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up in the Insomnia Podcast, as we begin here, I'm organizing my thoughts and we're going to kick off the meat of the podcast here very soon. Saudi's worn $180 oil. I've been talking about $200 oil. Unfortunately, I see that coming if this conflict doesn't stop soon. Entire countries may run out. Tehran threatens tourism sites. It's all a recipe, ladies and gentlemen, for higher commodities prices, higher oil prices, higher food prices. We'll be talking about how you can benefit from this in the course of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Javier Novoa, with The Libertarian Investor. We are live from Dallas, Texas, kicking off the podcast here. Today, ladies and gentlemen, was a historic day in the markets. We had oil down, well, not as high as it should have been today. We have stocks down, we have gold down, we have silver down, we have the dollar down. Everything in the United States is down. I'm going to give you a rational explanation as to why I think that is. How you can benefit from that, from everything in the United States being down, why gold and silver are down, and why that's actually a good sign for the precious metals. As we continue here on the Insomnia Podcast.
If this goes on for a couple of more weeks, again, according to Goldman Sachs, Qatar's GDP is going to contract 14%. Same thing with Kuwait. UAE is set for -5, Saudi -3. A lot of people tell me that those are conservative estimates, particularly for the UAE and Saudi. So they don't have that much time. The Israelis have the most amount of time. They're totally fine with just continuing and for them to live in bunkers as long as the US is part of the war. The question is who has most or least amount of time between the US and Iran. And if it takes several weeks and months, perhaps, for the US and Israel to kill off as many of these leaders as possible, and they can still sustain the war, they can sustain the economic cost, they can sustain the political fallout at home, then perhaps the US can achieve it with this strategy. But most people I speak to, from inside governments and outside, don't believe that that is the case. They believe that the US's time frame is actually much shorter than the Iranian one. Not because the US is weaker militarily, not because the US cannot take the military losses, but because of the political economic losses will force a new reality onto Trump in a couple of weeks that will have him essentially risk his presidency if he continues on this path.
And are you worried about their munition stockpiles as well that everyone is talking about? They're being depleted. They're being depleted even before this war. How big of a concern is that? They've taken THAAD batteries out of South Korea, for example, which is pretty significant because it took a lot of political work to have these batteries in South Korea in the first place. China was pissed off. North Korea was really upset. And after going through all that effort, you just pull them out. It's a pretty significant step.
Yeah, not my area of expertise to see exactly where the stockpiles are, etc. But again, everything I read and people I talk to inside the government are extremely worried about this. Particularly mindful of the fact that the Iranians still have a very, very significant stockpile of rockets left and missiles.
Including launchers?
Right. The fact that we constantly hear that the Israelis took out X amount, but as someone else pointed out recently, it seems like the Iranians are always hovering around 100 launchers or so, despite the number of launchers that the Israelis claim that they have taken out. And look, without a doubt, the Iranians are taking huge hits. This is going to set them back economically, even early for many, many years. But they're clearly the ones who understand that and have the capacity of taking those blows because they see this as existential. For Trump, this is not existential unless he goes so far that it really jeopardizes his presidency and the Republican Party, particularly with upcoming elections. But other than that, he could declare victory today and try to get out of this. He would probably have to declare victory, and most of the country will probably think, or most of his voters at least, will probably support him if he were to do so.
And ladies and gentlemen, we hope that that happens. We hope that that is the case. So let's see what's going on right now, because I just read this headline that there is an explosion at the Temple Mount. And again, that bodes apocalyptic. I certainly hope not. From the Drudge Report, take that as it may. Western Wall rabbi denounces missile fire near Holy Jerusalem site. Prays for peace. Of course, the Pope is also praying for peace. And anyone, again, who wants prosperity, who wants global prosperity, will be praying for peace. And it's something that we all hope to see very soon. And as Trita Parsi said, we hope that the people who decided to enter into this will have an epiphany and say, okay, let's get out. It's still not too late to minimize the damage, but we, unfortunately, as investors, have to be prepared for the worst case scenario here. The incident raised concerns because the area contains some of the holiest sites in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which unfortunately are all meeting in some kind of apocalyptic convergence, so to speak. And again, we hope that the flames can be put out. Rabbi of the Western Wall and Holy Site, Shmuel Rabinowitz, condemned the Iranian fire toward Jerusalem. At least that's what they say it is on Monday. After missile and interceptor fragments fell in and around the holy city. So, by the way, this was on March 17th, and I hadn't heard about this. So, at least this was a few days ago, it would seem, in a statement released on Tuesday. So this is sort of old news. I did not know that, but it just goes to speak of the great damage that could come about due to this conflict. He said, "We pray for quiet and for the well-being of the residents of Jerusalem and the state of Israel, for the safety of IDF soldiers and the security forces, as do we." So, there we stand on that. So what have I done this week investment-wise? I've been doing the same thing that I've been doing since the beginning of this conflict. I believe we're in day 20 of this conflict, and I've held my gold, I've held my silver, I've not sold any of that, and I would not recommend selling any of that. Of course, this is not investment advice, but just for educational purposes, gold and silver are going down now. And that is due, I believe, to market manipulation. It's due to fear, and it's simply due to people now withdrawing their money from every kind of asset that has anything to do with the United States, including the dollar. And either they're going into money market funds or they're going into foreign assets. And we're going to be talking about that more here in a minute. But I think this is bullish for gold and silver. Why? Because we're going to have sort of that snap where it goes down to a certain point when it finds that support, and this is going to snap back up like a rubber band, because the true prices of gold and silver, I guarantee you, are higher, are going to be higher due to the inflationary pressures that are going on with all of this chaos in the world. We are going to have to finance this war. It's not going to be from taxes. We're going to have to finance all of the government interventions because, again, not only are the gold and silver prices manipulated by paper, gold, and silver, the price of oil is being manipulated now because oil needs to be much higher. I would say that the true price of oil right now should be about $150 a barrel. It is still at, as I last checked, around $98 a barrel. They are pulling out all the stops to keep that price lower because President Trump knows that if gas prices go up too much, they've already gone up over 50%. He's toast in the next midterm election. His party, the Republican Party, is unfortunately going to suffer great defeat if everything goes according to plan, and we hope it does. But assets are going down. Gold and silver is down. Oil's down. So I'm keeping my gold and silver. I'm waiting for it to stabilize so that I can see another entry point, and I will buy more. I've been saying on Twitter, a lot of people are panicking. They're saying, well, why is gold and silver going down? It's supposed to be a safe haven. I said, take it to zero, because the lower it goes, the more of it I can buy. And we know that eventually economic law will catch up, just like economic law, natural law, always catches up. So I just don't know when, but I know that economic law is going to come back because government intervention can't stop it forever. They can stop it for a time. But so in the metals, that's what I'm doing. I'm just holding the position I've already got. And this week I did buy some options in Oxy. I sold them when it got to 61, made a nice profit on that. But I've still kept my shares in Occidental Petroleum because I know that Chevron and Exxon have gone up a lot more. They trace oil prices a lot more closely, but they're also a lot more expensive. Whereas Occidental Petroleum is cheaper, but what I've noticed about Occidental Petroleum is that it is on a delay of about a day. So when the oil price moves up, it takes Occidental Petroleum about a day to respond to that. And when it moves down, it takes it about a day to respond to that. So I have a little margin of safety in Occidental Petroleum, so I'm holding on to those shares. That is my only trading strategy right now. I have some more ideas according to what I think is going to happen in the world markets, because a lot of stock markets are way up. The Israeli stock market, last I checked, was way up. And as I said in my earlier video, if stocks are down, gold is down, silver is down, oil, in my opinion, is down because it's not as high as it was. Treasury yields are way up, which means the dollar's down. Where's all that money going? And of course, I've read a lot about the fact that it's going into money markets. It's going into a lot of risk-off trades, but it's also going outside of the country. It's going outside of dollars. So what I'm trying to do is find a position that I can enter into that's not already too late, that's not already priced in. And as you'll see, I think that we have ample opportunities to find this trade or this longer-term investment. But I think the time is past where we should think about putting the bulk of our resources into the United States stock market, because again, the center of power has been transferring for 20, 30, 40 years. But this conflict is just accelerating that. It's just precipitating that. So that's what I think is happening. I think money is flowing out of the United States into other assets. It's also being hidden. We don't know exactly where it's going, but I'm going to give you my best guesses as to that. So we're going to a short break. And when we come back, I want to talk about this idea of a safe haven, because a lot of people are shaken from gold. They're even shaken from cryptocurrencies, which I'm sort of still on the fence about. I think cryptocurrencies could be a good short-term trade, or even a medium-term trade, but it's not money. Gold and silver are truly money because they arose spontaneously on the market. But I want to go into this idea of a safe haven, and we'll do that right when I come back here in just a moment. We're going to go to a break, and I will see you on the other side. So the problem with most traders and investors, the problem with most politicians, the problem with most economists, yes, is that they do not understand economics. In fact, I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I talk to a lot of people who even have master's degrees and PhDs in economics, and I tell them about Austrian economics, and they say, we've never heard of Austrian economics. Have you ever heard of Ludwig von Mises? Have you ever heard of Friedrich Hayek? Have you ever heard of Murray Rothbard? Of course, if you don't know, research it. These were the great pioneers of Austrian economics. And they say, I've never heard of Austrian economics. What's Austrian economics? And I love that. I love that because the Keynesian paradigm, as Gary North said, he was another great teacher of Austrian economics, it makes you stupid. So people who follow conventional economics, modern economics, even people who are masters and PhDs, they may be good traders in a limited scope, but they cannot see how to deal with a situation that is different from the status quo. And for about almost 100 years, we've been in the Keynesian status quo, and all of the investment and trading professionals, for the most part, have been educated in this, and they've been quants, and they've been educated in econometrics and so on. So they're not able to see the full narrative. They're not able to, even oftentimes, they're not able to see the geopolitical narrative. So I'd say, great, because we have a heavily competitive advantage. And I can see this on X, on Twitter, when I've seen all these people today saying, well, I thought gold was a safe haven. I thought silver was a safe haven. Why is it down? Even people saying, and I can't believe anyone would still think this, people are saying the dollar is a safe haven. So why is the dollar down? And this whole concept of a safe haven is economically fallacious, because let's go back to the basics of economics. What is the role of the entrepreneur? What is the role of the capitalist? The role of the capitalist is to allocate his capital to the commodities or the capital goods or the producer goods that will best serve the needs and wants of the consumers. It's very simple, but if you have a PhD in economics, you're sort of blocked from seeing this. So in that paradigm, how could there be a safe haven? And, you know, the great economists used to talk about, like Ricardo and others, that people, especially the business class, are always rent seeking, which they're trying to seek a place to put their money where they have no risk and where they can just get a passive income. That doesn't exist on the free market. And Mises had this great quote, and it went something like this. He said, every day we have to go to the market anew and serve the consumer. A safe haven would be to say, well, I don't need to serve the consumer. I can just put my money here and it'll be safe no matter what happens. No, the market's always going to fluctuate because the conditions fluctuate, and therefore the wants and needs of the consumers fluctuate. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's basic, Javier. Why would you even say that? Well, why are people asking me, is gold and silver and the dollar a safe haven? Gold and silver are not a safe haven, but we can safely expect that over time, gold and silver are going to go up in value in fiat currency. Why? Because fiat currencies, by their very nature, are inflationary. You have to make more of it because otherwise you can't meet the growing obligations of government. And the government's grown so much, the debt and the deficit have grown so much. I think it was Powell who was saying the other day that we had a similar situation to this in the 70s, but everything was all right in the 70s. But and he was comparing the situation now to the situation in the 70s, I believe, the oil embargo. But the debt now is like multiples of what it was in the 70s. How can you leave the national debt and the deficit out of your equation? The debt's going to affect interest rates. It's going to affect the value of the dollar. It's going to affect whether anyone wants to take dollars in the future. And we are going into a world where the dollar is going to be undercut. And I believe that when all the dust is settled, when we go into this new Bretton Woods, this new international arrangement, monetary arrangement, it's not going to be the currency of any one country that's going to be a reserve currency. So they're going to go back to gold and silver. Gold will be the reserve currency. That's my prediction. That's good because it's not going to benefit any one country, any one empire. But governments don't want to do that now because governments are just expansionists by their very definition today. And it's every single country that's like that. So that's why my major thesis is, of course, I have trading plans, I have investing plans, but my major thesis is to get my money into precious metals over time. And over time, those precious metals are going to rise. So I get excited when gold and silver go down. I hope gold goes back down to $1,000 an ounce. I hope silver goes back down to $20 an ounce. Why? Because I know it's all temporary. I know it's due to manipulation of the markets. And so we're seeing this now because last week the dollar was going up and people were saying, even Mr. Trump was saying, well, you see higher oil prices benefit us because it benefits the petrodollar. In conjunction with that, it's very interesting how gold and silver traders think because the Fed last week, they didn't increase interest rates as they should have. First of all, there shouldn't be a Fed. Interest rates should just be set by the free market. But if you have a Federal Reserve or a central bank, they should increase interest rates when they see that we're going into an inflationary environment. Inflation, even according to the government numbers, has become a lot higher. But Powell did what he usually does. He's considered more hawkish. And he is my favorite Fed chair since Volcker, perhaps. Of course, I wasn't born when Volcker was in office, and they did not lower interest rates. Now, everyone was expecting the Fed to lower interest rates. Of course, the Trump administration really wants the Fed to lower interest rates. I was joking because Peter Navarro, and you can go on X and see what I call him there. It's what Elon Musk called him. I can't say it here on YouTube, but Peter Navarro is not very smart. Why? Because he's a PhD economist. PhD economists are not very smart, but he was saying the Fed should lower interest rates because that will benefit American families. In the short term, it will put more money out there to prop up these zombie corporations and keep the economy up, keep asset prices artificially inflated. But due to this war now, they're not even going to be able to do that, even if they did lower interest rates. But the point is, everyone was expecting the Fed to lower interest rates. That didn't happen. And so what did gold traders do? Silver traders. They said, well, that's good for the dollar. So they sold gold, they sold silver, and they went into the dollar. And the dollar increased. Well, now the dollar's going down along with everything else. You see interest rates on treasury bonds going up. You see the US dollar to euro went way down. So now everything's going down. And the point is, gold and silver eventually will increase in relation to a falling fiat currency. So that's my long-term play on gold and silver. And again, right now, the only thing I'm really thinking about in terms of these markets is gold, silver, and oil. USO, and again, this is not investment advice, but USO is a good play. Unfortunately, it's not going to be good for society if oil prices increase precipitously. Of course, the price of diesel is already over $5 a gallon, but we can profit from it. And again, buy Chevron, buy Exxon, buy Oxy again, because I think Oxy is a very good, cheap proxy for oil prices. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. So another thing that I'm doing, I mentioned it in passing last week, was the alpha strategy. And I'd advise everyone to do this because you have to get prepared. That's all I'm going to say for whatever may happen. And that means slowly getting a food storage for your family. That means slowly perhaps even storing some gasoline for your vehicles. And that means procuring things that you think you may need so that you can live a little bit independently of the grid if things go down. I was listening to some horrifying analysis like about the fact that if the Iranians decided to target this one facility in Qatar, there could be a global famine. I don't remember exactly the details, but it's a very complex production process of these trains that are produced there, and there are only 15 of them in the world, and they can only be produced in this one city in Pennsylvania. And it would take like 5 years to replace them if they, were destroyed or went offline. And now it's very possible that these could be destroyed. Again, we would see a 10-year global famine. And again, that's an extreme outcome. I hope it doesn't happen, but instability may be in the cards. And again, I still hold out hope that we may be able to forestall this, to stop this, if our leaders wise up. So let's hope that happens. So we're going to one more break, and then I will be back and I will talk about what some of my tentative ideas are for investing in a new world where American assets will go down due to a transfer of the center of power to the east, to the BRICS. So stay with us, guys, here on the Insomnia Podcast. If you like this information, by the way, please do subscribe to the channel, like the videos, comment on it, and we can all learn from each other. So I'll see you in a little bit, guys. What can we do, guys? Because again, it doesn't matter what happens, right? It matters how we react to this. And again, I said energy, I said oil. And again, this is not investment advice. just what I think. And you can tell me where I'm wrong too, and what you think we could do. But I was having discussions, and people have pointed out also that European markets are probably going to be benefiting a lot from this quote unquote America off trade. Asian markets will, of course, be benefiting, and I'm looking for plays in Asian markets. I think a very good play right now, because it is emerging. It is not yet something that many people have jumped onto. The Japanese yen, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps buying yen with your dollars and holding on to that for a period, because I think the yen could benefit just from the diminution in the dollar, the rising of interest rates here, real interest rates and so on. So I think the yen is a good play. And I'm looking into that as well. Of course, precious metals. And another play that I've been thinking about is the fact that medicine and medical technology are necessities. So even if we are in a risk-off trade or an America-off trade, I think pharmaceutical companies, I think medical technology companies, not only in the United States, but in Europe, in Asia, still stand to benefit. And I think there are a lot of companies that have breakthroughs. From time to time, we traded Omeros before, which is an American pharmaceutical company. I'm looking into that. So these are all sectors and areas that I'm looking into, but you have to have it in your mind to start researching another market, another country. We cannot just stay in the United States. We cannot continue to invest in the United States, because no matter what happens in this current situation, the balance of power was and is moving east. And again, that's due to our own bad economic decisions. That's due to the fact that we have eroded our capital base in this country. How? By having such onerous regulations that production and labor became so expensive here that we had to start moving our capital and production and labor overseas. So other countries' economic bases have benefited from that. China has benefited, and other countries have benefited. So that's my play right now. That's why I'm moving around in my mind. And again, if you have any ideas, please let us know. So thanks for joining us, guys, on this Insomnia podcast. It has been a very crazy week. I expect a more interesting week next week. I still expect to do well in Occidental Petroleum, in my oil trade. I may buy some more options, and we'll see where that goes. But again, praying for peace, praying for stability, but preparing for whatever can happen. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, please do subscribe to our channel, The Libertarian Investor. Like the videos, comment on the videos, and together, let's get rich. Until very soon, guys, have a lovely weekend. This is Javier Novoa from The Libertarian Investor, signing off.